Hello everyone. So before I go through what what are we covering, I'll just start my instance. So while the checks are done, we will check what are the topics we would cover today. It's a V5, wherein we'll go ahead with the practical we did in the last session. We first create a project folder and then an orchestration job and then an S3 component. So we'll go a little ahead today. With the S3 component, we will load the data from the S3 and load it into a table and Snowflake. Along with that, while we execute, we will also go through the environment panel and the task panel. So let's see if our instance is still initializing. I've logged into my AWS and I've kept my S3 ready. Let me quickly show you. If you've previously used, you will have it in recently visited, or just say S3 and you will have it here. So in S3 we usually create a bucket. It's kind of like a folder. Then we will go ahead and put our data there. So the data I created was from the ChatGPT, but again I've edited to customize to my changes. To create, say already I have a bucket, but that was for a trial. So how do you create a bucket? You just click on create bucket and just give a name. Note that it has to be in lowercase and it has to be unique. If it's not, it will let you know. Once that is done, just go down and say create bucket. You don't need to worry about the other settings as of now. Now my bucket is created. Just open this and we will put our data. I will upload the data into my Git and I will share the link for you all to download. So let me quickly upload. Click on upload, say add files and just redirect to your particular file. Once that is done, just say upload and the file will be uploaded. So that's done. So going to my notes, what are we going to do today in terms of practical is we'll create an S3 bucket, load the data into S3, which we have done now. Next we'll create a table in Snowflake and then we'll create a stage, that is this is in Matillion, okay, which is pointing to this S3 and it's configure S3 component, okay, and then we will validate and see if it was successful. Okay, so let me go back. So our bucket is ready. Let it be here. So let me open my Snowflake and provide the GitHub file link over here. Next is to create table. You just have to, we have already created the database, temp database and the schema in the last session. I'm just gonna create this table. Just copy. The database we created was demo and the schema is demo schema. I'm just gonna paste it. I'm just gonna say demo student records and just execute this. And it is successfully created. So just let's check it. Demo schema, the tables. It's not seen. This was the one I created while practicing, and the one which we just created, that is demo student records, has come up here. Okay, back to our checklist. We are done with the S3 bucket and loading the data. We have created the table in Snowflake. Let's go to Matillion and create the stage that is pointing to S3. Let's see, it's still showing initializing. Yeah, the checks have passed. So I'll just copy the instance ID and say load address. The username is always EC2 user and the password is an instance ID which we just copied. Say login. So it's loaded. Let's go to our project which we had already created, and project A was the project, right? So let's load this S3 load. So it's nothing but it's orchestration job that we had created, and this comes by default. Let me pull an S3 and S3 is here. So we'll fill in the details. Our next job is actually to create the stage. So say right click here and say manage stages. I have one because when I was prepping I have created one. So you won't have any. You just click on plus and say create or replace. And where do you want, which way you want it to point? So it's demo schema. I want to give a name stage. Next. So we are pointing somewhere external, and we have chosen AWS, and the authentication would be credentials, and this is the credentials we already created in the last session. And then when you load this, you will see the bucket you just created. So this is the bucket we just created. Just see that and say OK. Encryption none. Finish. And your stage is ready. Say OK. Now we are done with pointer 3. Next is configuring the S3. So let's go here. Meanwhile, we will also check our demo schema, which is our Snowflake details, whether our table is being seen. Yeah, our table is seen here. So we have the stage pointing to S3. Okay, and our table is also created. So let's just configure the S3. So these are the properties we need to load. Just the name, if you want to change the name to Snowflake, you can give whatever description needed. And you need to point to your stage. The stage we just created was TSB stage, and then we can say pattern. So we can play with this pattern. This is basically the regex, and dot star means anything in this particular folder in the stage. What path you have given, right? S3. Anything in that folder will be picked. Okay. Say OK. Encryption was none. Warehouse we have already set it to this itself, but anyways I will choose it now. You can leave it as default. Usually this is handled with the variable. So while you're doing variable, we will transform this. And what's our target table? Where we want to load in the Snowflake was a table we just created, that is demo students records. Okay. So when I say this, it will show all the columns that particular table had, and these are the ones. And I don't want to choose any of these. I'm just gonna select all the columns. Okay, and the file type is CSV, and field delimiter is for the CSV is comma. And yes, I want to skip header because I had one line of header, one row. So I will say 1, skip blank line. So if you can customize what you're loading. So if you want to skip some blank lines, you can do that. If your date format, the time format is not the standard format, you can let it know. Okay. And these are all the custom fields, right? If you want to trim space, what does it do? If it has a null or not, if it has an empty field, how you want it to behave, if you want and all that is over here. So once you come here, you will see purge files. Purge files means what? Once it's loaded, do you want Matillion to delete it from the S3? I said false because I didn't want to delete from the S3, but if you say true, this is what gonna happen. Forced load is mainly usually we try to keep it true, because so what happens is there's an intelligence with Snowflakes that if you are trying to reload the same thing again and again, it will have a cache which will remember it. Forced load means it goes beyond all that and it will forcefully load again. Okay, and that's all. Some important stuff. If you want to more, like I told you about properties last time, you can go to help. All the details for each row is of the properties is here, and you have to click here if you want to see the full documentation. Okay, so like I told last time, whatever you do, it's converted into an SQL script and you can see that SQL script. So in case you had to copy something from an CSV, this would be the code you would use, right? Copy into this, and this would be your variables. So you're doing everything in terms of UI. Okay, over here, yeah, everything looks fine. Now let's see the options in the right click over here. You can run only this component if you want. So usually it's not just one component, you will have lot many components in a flow. If you just want to run a component, this is what you use. Run from components. The sentences are pretty obvious here. You want to revalidate the job. When you revalidate, it will show you some obvious mistakes, like if you have not filled some mandatory properties and so. And you want to run the entire job, you can do it here, but this is in the AWS CRED, which is your default. How do you know it's a default? You can see here it is selected. Okay, if you want to run it in other environment, you can do so. Okay, and some other things, important schedule job we'll be doing in future. Variables also we would be covering, and in case you want to export this is where you go. And to close the job, you can create a node S3. Okay, you can bring this up. Okay, and that's how you write a note. So you can take this and extract it to a new job. You can disable the component in case when you're running a flow and you're debugging, you can disable this component. You can delete this component. I think each of the sentence is pretty obvious here. For some things like grid variables and scheduling of job, we'll be doing that in future. So let me just run this job, and you can see the task here. It's running, and if I click over here, it loads up here to show me what is being done, and it says yes, I did start the S3 load, and the component start 0 was also executed, and then we went through our S3 load wherein it loaded 12 records. Okay, those were the records I had in my CSV. We can quickly either go to my Snowflake and check if it's actually loaded, or you can also there's another way which we'll realize in future, that is you can take an transformation job and load that table up to see if it really changed. But let me take this part, which is easy as of now. Select all from and like you see, it has been loaded. Yeah, so the working with the S3 component was successful. Now that we are done with that practical, let's see what an environment panel is and what is the task panel. Okay, now this is the environment panel. So now that we have worked already on this, you have an idea what it is. It is nothing but a single connection to the database or your S3, right? On which you will run the jobs, right? So basically these are your connection to your database. Okay, and over here you would create some stages which will give you wherein you can configure your S3, right? So in the workspace, what will happen is you could probably have a different environment for testing, you could have different for development, something else for sanity, and something else for production. So you would have multiple. So there are different ways people handle working with the stage, the production, the development. This would be one of it. Next is the task panel. The task tab shows information about task that is run during the current session. Like we saw when we ran it, you saw this record. Okay, you could also just expand this and see the details, but usually it's just not 2 jobs, right? So we will click on this arrow and see it in full. Okay, and then you have something called as search, where you can search, and then you have a console, which is actually the Matillion console, and then you have a command log, which is an archive of interactions between the current browser session and your ETL server. Okay, you are less likely to need to go through all this, right? Everything that you do will be limited to this point. Okay, so notices is nothing but a list of notification concerning the Matillion ETL project, including updates to the Matillion ETL. Okay, like I said, you don't need to worry much about all this. What you are concerned with the task tab. Okay, so with that we are done with the environment panel as well as tasks panel. One more thing I would like to show is so basically this is the task history. So there are many other ways wherein you can check your task history. You can just go to your job. You can just go to your job and say task history, and it will tell how many times it was run, right? And with details about which environment, which job, when it started, when it ended, the duration, everything. That's one way to get task history based on your particular job. So this is in general for everything on the screen. One more way would be project and task history. Okay, so these are the multiple ways wherein you can see the task history. That's all I had for this video. Please do try this practical. This is where your journey would start practically. Okay, thank you.